Hi everybody, in this video I just want to give you some of a sample in relation to the IELTS webinar we have every Wednesday at 3:30. So today I'm going to show you some material in relation to writing, a sample question for writing and a sample answer, and we will try to analyze the vocabulary in relation to the writing and the corrections and the mistakes. That's the first plan. The second part is maybe to look at some listening, so specifically some listening in relation to the IELTS as well. So that's hopefully the content for today's video, and it's a little sample to try and show you some typical work that we do in the webinars every week. Okay, so on the left, you can see the question. This is the specific question for the writing. Okay, so it's task 1. And specifically the question is here, the chart below shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods and whether they are studying full-time or part-time. So your job in the IELTS exam for the writing in this part always is to summarize, okay? So you need to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So that's really your job. You have to really understand the question and you have to answer specifically the question. You have to do your job perfectly, okay? And again, just to say again, your job is to summarize the information and specifically summarize by selecting and reporting the main features of the chart. So what do you think are the main characteristics of the chart, the main parts of the chart? That's really your job. And you have to summarize and also make comparisons where relevant. So that's your opinion, really, okay? So here you can see the graph. You can see male on the left and female on the right. And specifically on the left, it's men and women in further education in the thousands. So 200,000, 400,000, 600, 800, and maybe 1 million males in further education in 1970 and 71, and you can see here it's part-time, okay, and in black it's full-time, so approximately maybe 100,000 in full-time education who are males in 1970 and 71. If we move 10 years later, you can see the number of males in part-time education has decreased and the number of males in full-time education has increased a little. So there's a big point you can make here. So that's a change. And then if we continue for 10 years later, there is another increase in males in part-time education. And again, another big increase in males in full-time education. So if we compare the males to the female situation on the right, in 1970, the number of females in part-time education was just below 800,000. And in full-time education, it was quite low, maybe at less than 100,000. So if we move 10 years later, you can see the number of females in part-time education has increased by maybe 200,000 approximately. And there's a big increase in the number of full-time females in education in 1980. So that's probably the most significant change. And if we continue 10 years later in 1990, there's an enormous and a huge increase in part-time education with females in 1990 above 1 million, and the number of full-time females is similar compared to 1980. So you have to interpret this graph first. That's your job. You need to interpret the graph and then you need to summarize the main features, and probably it's very independent, so you can decide what are the main features for yourself. Okay, so that's really your job for task 1. Just to show you the question again, and about 20 minutes on this task. Okay, so if I show you an example, here we can see from the IELTS official page, they give an authentic and a real example of somebody who has written their answer. Okay, so maybe the text is a bit difficult to catch, but the job now is to try to identify the errors, try to identify the mistakes, and try to focus on some of the positive things as well. Okay, so it's very difficult to read, but we will try our best. So at the beginning, according to, that's very good English. In Spanish, it's según. According to this graph, the number of men and women in further education in Britain shows the following pattern. So that's very good vocabulary as well. A pattern is like a sequence or a design. And in this situation, it's very appropriate and it's very, very good vocabulary. So if we continue, in the case of male, so I have a little question here. I think there's a possible error here, and I'm just curious if you can identify the mistake. The number of male, and again, I think it's the same mistake here, has declined. So this is a good example of the present perfect. Okay, so has declined is a very, very good example of the present perfect. And that is important because when you write, you need to show a variety of your grammar. You need to show a mix of your grammar. You need to maybe show some present perfect, past perfect, conditional, passive, active, past simple, etc. You need to show a variety of your tenses, and that's very, very important. And here is the present perfect. So it's a really good example. Also, the vocabulary slightly is very positive and very good because people normally say a little or a bit, but slightly has the significance of a little. Okay, so for example, are you happy with the weather? I am slightly unhappy, and that means you are a little unhappy. Okay, so slightly is a very, very important word. It's very fluent, but when people learn English, it's not a word people generally learn very quickly. So it's a very advanced word, and it's something I recommend to try to remember and to use frequently. Okay, so slightly is very, very good. And again, the present perfect. From about one, so again, here in the next part, I think I see a confusion. And for me, this is a little bit strange, this structure, because the person who has written this has included the numbers and the letters. So for me, that's a bit strange. I would probably select just the numbers or select the letters. I would not mix the two. Okay, so for this reason, I would probably say 1 million, because that would be obviously the correct number, or you could say 1 million as well. So for me, that's necessary, and this is an error here in the example we have here. Okay, in 1970-71 to about 850,000, and here it's just a small error, but I would probably eliminate the S. Okay, so 850,000 is sufficient. We don't need the S. That's very, very important. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So it's plural, but still it's only the D. It's not necessary the S. Okay. In 1990, 1991. However, that's a good linker, and that's very important as well. So however is a very basic linker, but at the same time, it's important you use a good mix of linkers and more formal and more appropriate linkers as well. We have a lot of linkers in English, and this is just one little example of one small linker. But the more linkers you use, the better. Okay, so however, this figure rose, this is really good vocabulary because the verb is to rise and the past is rose, rise, rose, risen. So the past is irregular, and it's a very, very good example of more vocabulary that's less typical. Okay, so you need vocabulary that is less typical, and the better vocabulary, the less common the vocabulary you have, the higher the mark you have. So this is really, really good. Rose, pattern, slightly, they're really good examples of very appropriate and very good level vocabulary. Okay, again, I would eliminate here the S, 850,000 in 1990 and 1991 from about 820,000 again. Okay, in 1980, 1981, the proportion, very good vocabulary, of full-time education has declined. So again, this is the present perfect. And again, that's quite good, but probably it's repetition. So you can see has declined here and has declined here. So it's probably repetition. So in an exam, in this situation, you should try to use another alternative, a synonym or different vocabulary to express the same significance. So maybe has dropped, has fallen. Definitely it's necessary to use another word because we have already written has declined already. So for this reason, you should try to think of alternative vocabulary and a synonym in this case during this period. However, again, I would make the same point that you have used already, however. So because you have used it before, I would consider another linker, and that's very, very important, I think. So there's two examples of repetition already. and it's necessary to maybe avoid this type of problem. Okay, the proportion of part-time education has increased. Again, present perfect, so another good structure, and dramatically. So slightly first and dramatically second. So this is very, very good and quite good use of the vocabulary again. So if we continue, on the other hand, again, this is a typical linker. Not too difficult, but very basic. But again, it's a good linker and it's necessary to use the linkers appropriately. In the case of female, so the error here, I think, will be very similar to the error above. Okay, so here, I don't think I've explained the mistake. So I would say here, in the case of males, so it needs to be plural. Okay, in the case of males or in the case of men. So here, I think definitely we need the plural. Okay, and the same here in the case of female, I think we need to say plural as well in the case of females. That's necessary for sure. Okay, and I think that's a big, a very obvious little mistake. Okay, the number of both full-time education and part-time education has increased during the period. Okay, so now I'm just going to close the, I'm going to move the text a little bit down so we can finish the second part. So in the case of female, the number of both full-time education and part-time education has increased. A little detail, you can have a look at this sentence yourself and give me your opinion. But for me, I would probably change this word. Okay, I would say the number 4, both full-time education and part-time education. It's a small little change, but I think it would be a little bit more comfortable if we said the number 4, both full-time education and part-time education has increased. And again, present perfect. Appropriate, maybe variety is important, but maybe it's not possible to change the tense every time, but it's something to consider. We have the present perfect frequently. So maybe if we can use maybe a mix or another tense, that might be a good possibility too. Okay, from about 700,000. So this definitely needs to change. As I said, it could be written the numbers 700,000 or the words 700,000. And again, I would eliminate the yes. So that's an obvious correction and an obvious change. In 1990, 1991, these figures rose. Again, really good vocabulary, but we already have rose. So I'm not worried too much because it's good vocabulary, but we should try to think of another synonym that would be very, very good. Of course, increased, that's one possibility, and you need time to think of another possibility. Also for me, I need time to think of another situation. So it's just something to remember. A synonym is a good idea in these type of exams. To about 820,000, again, I would eliminate the S. In 1990, 1980 and 1981, to about, again, exactly the same problem in 1990, 1991. In terms of, so this is very good vocabulary, it's a good linker, and it's quite fluent in terms of, so it's really nice, full-time education. This figure rose, so probably repetition again. So we need to think of synonyms for sure by about 260 to about 900 in 1990, 1991. On the other hand, so this is clear, it's repetition again, because here we had on the other hand, and that's a mistake because the typical structure is on the one hand and then on the other hand. But in this situation, it's repetition on the other hand. So we need the contrast in the one hand or on the one hand, and in the other hand or on the other hand. So we need the balance. But in this situation, it's the same expression twice. And for that reason, it's probably considered a writing mistake. Okay. With respect to, that's a good linker again. So with respect to part-time education, this figure rose. So definitely now we have used too many times the same word. Definitely now it's very, very obvious. And again, dramatically is probably repetition. So this is a good example. This text is a very, very good example for the necessity of synonyms and different vocabulary. So this is very, very clearly important to choose different vocabulary, okay, between 1980 and 81 and 1970 and 71. However, again, we have another linker we've used already. this figure rose and again. So we have a lot of repetition for the vocabulary. So for me, it's very obvious that this student needs to use a variety of vocabulary and synonyms to show they have a wider vocabulary in this situation, okay? But apart from the vocabulary, I think the majority is quite good. And basically my mark for this person would be not bad, because we need to remember for the criteria for the writing. So I'm just going to show you again at the top of this page, the criteria for the writing always in the IELTS exam, task 1 and task 2 is here. Task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resources, grammatical range and accuracy. So they're the 4 areas that are very, very important in the writings always. So task achievement is number 1, and I will explain now. And then coherence and cohesion is number 2. Lexical resource is number 3, and grammatical range and accuracy is number 4. Okay. So basically, in the first part, the task achievement, you need to answer specifically the question. And if we look at the question here, again, the question specifically is to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So in this writing, if you think this student has answered the question perfectly, like summarizing and the main features, well, in that case, you will have a high mark for the task achievement. So that's how you get a high level for the task achievement. So you really need to specifically answer the question that is given. So I think, yes, I think that the student speaks about the main features. I think they summarize a little and make a few comparisons, but probably they could do a little bit more, okay, in relation to that point. So that would be for task achievement. Coherence and cohesion is about linkers. So are the linkers, the linking words, are they appropriate? Are they very good? Are they good quality? And as I said here, there's 2 examples of maybe the mistake however was used many, many times. So a lot of repetition for however, and on the other hand was repetition for the same linker when we need on the one hand, on the other hand. So for this reason, I think that will be considered a little negative in the coherence and cohesion. But apart from the repetition, I think it's not too bad. I have definitely seen worse efforts. So I think maybe medium mark here again. Lexical resources, so this is vocabulary. Again, in this text, slightly rose. The student has used a couple of very, very good quality vocabulary, but there's a lot of repetition for the same word. For example, rose, slightly, dramatically. And in the exam, you have a higher mark if you show a variety, if you show a mix of vocabulary. And for this reason, I think this particular example would be a little bit negative in respect to the lexical resource, because on the one hand, there's some very good vocabulary, but on the other hand, there's a lot of repetition. Okay. Grammatical range and accuracy. The accuracy in general is very good. The present perfect is very accurate. The present perfect is precise. The past irregular is precise with rows. So a lot of the accuracy is okay. There's no real problem with the accuracy of the grammar, but the range, I would suggest, is the area to improve, because we've seen the present perfect, we've seen the past simple, but we have not seen a lot of other tenses. For example, the passive, the past perfect. I don't see any examples here. I could be wrong, but immediately I don't see any example of the passive. I don't see an example of the conditional. And to receive a higher mark, I think it's a better idea if you can introduce a mix. You have a lot of time, you have a lot of space to try and attempt to have a mix of grammar. And for this reason, I think there could be a little negative score for that area as well. So definitely not maximum points. Probably, I would say 6. That would be my opinion from 9. And perfect, it's exactly the same as the examiner. So this is the comment from the examiner. And it's an interesting opinion. So the candidate has made a good attempt or a good effort to describe the graphs. So I agree, it's a good effort. Looking at global trends or big ideas and more detailed figures. There is, however, some information missing, okay, and information is inaccurate. So according to the examiner, there's some information missing, and that's probably in relation to this area, task achievement, okay. The answer flows quite smoothly, so that's a compliment. That's a very good comment. So that's in relation to coherence and cohesion. In general, it's easy to read and it's very comfortable and very appropriate. I agree, although connectives are overused. So repetition for however, repetition for on the other hand, are inappropriate, okay? And some of the points do not link up well. Okay, so that's probably in relation to coherence and cohesion. In relation to lexical vocabulary and resources and the grammar accuracy is quite good. So this is exactly what I said, exactly the same as my opinion. The accuracy is very good, and the language used to describe the trends is well handled, so it's well managed, so the vocabulary is good. However, there are problems with expression and the appropriate choice of words. Okay, so what I said, really, vocabulary. Whilst is the same as while, like mientras. There is good structural control. The complexity and variation in sentences are limited. So it's more or less exactly what I said, but in different words, in different way. And it's probably similar to my comment. That's what we have said already. So for this reason, the level was 6 from 9. And an interesting example, definitely an interesting example to see a good writing and to get the opinion of the examiner. So always this criteria, the 4 criteria, are the most important always in the writing exams. Okay, so task achievement, number 1, you have to answer specifically the question. You have to answer every part of the question, number 1. Number 2, it needs to have a flow. It needs to flow smoothly. It needs to be comfortable with the linkers, and it needs to be appropriate and maybe at an advanced level as well. The vocabulary, this example has a limit of the vocabulary, but we need more vocabulary, and better appropriate synonyms as well would help improve the mark here. And as we said, the grammar, the accuracy is fine, but maybe not a range, no mix of the grammar tenses. So that's always the same in every writing. The criteria is the same specifically for the IELTS, but also for the Cambridge exams, this criteria is practically the same. And for other exams in English, the writing criteria is more or less the same. Okay, so that's good. And this is the website from IELTS, and you can find all the material on the IELTS website, and they have good examples and a lot of material for people to show, okay, or to try. Now I want to move to some listening. Okay, so that was the writing section. And now I want to move to some listening. And during the webinar, normally we practice some listenings together. And recently we have tried a few different exercises. And here on the website, you can see a few examples. And I think last week we finished with number 6. So just to show you the example for number 6, it was about a hotel. So definitely last week in the webinar, we did number 6. So now we're going to move to number 7. And here you can see the questions. So I'm just going to read the instructions for everybody. We can look at the questions, and then I will show you the audio. You can listen to the audio and try to catch the correct and appropriate answer. So part 2, questions 11 to 15, your job is to label, okay, to label the plan or the map below. You need to choose 5 answers from the box and write the correct letters A to I next to questions 11 to 15. So 5 answers, okay? So on the left, you can see the map or the plan, and it's the library. And you can see number 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and you are here at the entrance. So the person on the audio will explain the direction, and you need to identify the correct room. Is it an art collection, A, children's books, computers, local history collection, meeting room, multimedia, periodicals, reference books, or tourist information? So we only need to select 5, and the job is to identify the correct option for the space. Okay, so very interesting. And I think you're ready. And now I will play the audio. So this was number 6, I think. And maybe I was wrong. I think it was number 7. So let me open number 7 here. and you might hear the audio now very quickly.
You will hear the librarian.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to show the audio here on the right, and I'm going to open the options here at the same time so everybody can try this exercise. And in the exam, you only have one time to listen to the audio. So in the exam, there's only one opportunity. In the Cambridge exam, I think you have 2 times to listen to the audio, but in this situation, it's only one. So you need to be prepared, you need to be ready, you need to read the questions. And now I will press play and we can try to do the exercises together. And hopefully the volume is okay, and hopefully the connection will be fine as well. Okay.
You'll hear the librarian of a new town library talking to a group of people who are visiting the library.
Okay, everyone. So here we are at the entrance to the town library. My name is Anne, and I'm the chief librarian here. And you'll usually find me at the desk just by the main entrance here. So I'd like to tell you a bit about the way the library is organized and what you'll find where. And you should all have a plan in front of you. Well, as you see, my desk is just on your right as you go in. And opposite this, the first room on your left has an excellent collection of reference books and is also a place where people can read or study peacefully. Just beyond the librarian's desk on the right is a room where we have up-to-date periodicals such as newspapers and magazines. And this room also has a photocopier in case you want to copy any of the articles. If you carry straight on, you'll come into a large room, and this is the main library area. There is fiction in the shelves on the left and non-fiction materials on your right. And on the shelves on the far wall, there is an excellent collection of books relating to local history. We're hoping to add a section on local tourist attractions too later in the year. Through the far door in the library, just past the fiction shelves, is a seminar room, and that can be booked for meetings or talks. And next door to that is the children's library, which has a good collection of stories and picture books for the under 11s. Then there's a large room to the right of the library area. That's the multimedia collection, where you can borrow DVDs and so on. And we also have CD-ROMs you can borrow to use on your computer at home. It was originally the art collection, but that's been moved to another building. And that's about it. Oh, there's also the library office on the left of the librarian's desk. Okay, now, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Okay, very good. So that's a good example of the listening.
You'll hear the librarian of a new town.
A very good example of the listening, and not too difficult. Honestly, I think it was not too difficult. I think the level of vocabulary is not bad. A little easy, I think. It should be level B2 at least. And I don't think it was too difficult. There was 1 or 2 expressions that were tricky. There was 1 or 2 expressions that were difficult. And now I will show you the answers, number 1. Okay, so number 1, the answers I think are at the bottom. So 11 was H, 12 was G, 13 was D, 14 was B, and 15 was F. Okay, so hopefully you can make a note of that. And for me, it was very, very clear. The lady had a very Australian accent. So definitely she had an Australian accent. And I'm going to show you the script. So here is the script of the lady, what she said. And I will try to identify the most important vocabulary here. Okay, so for me, the majority was quite clear, but there was 1 or 2 expressions that were a little bit difficult that we will try to explain now. Okay, my name is Anne, I'm the chief librarian. So a librarian is the person that works in the library. So the suffix, you need to be very clear. For example, electrician is the person, scientist, magician. So always you need to be clear of the suffix for the person. And here's the librarian. You'll usually or normally find me at the desk, the specific location at the desk, just by or beside the main entrance here. So I would like to tell you a bit about the way the library is organized and what you'll find where. You should have a plan or a map. Okay, so it's two possibilities. Typically we say a map, but I suppose an alternative is a plan. Well, as you see, my desk is just on the right as you go in, and opposite this room on your left has an excellent collection of reference books. So I think that's the first answer, the reference books on the room to the left. And it's also a place where people can read or study peacefully. Just beyond the librarian's desk on the right is a room where we have up-to-date or modern up-to-date periodicals. So I think that's the answer for the second room. So periodicals just beyond the library desk, such as, or for example, newspapers and magazine. And this room has a photocopier in case you want to copy any of the materials. So for me, this expression was the most difficult. So the verb in English to carry on has the significance to continue. Carry on speaking, carry on running, carry on talking. It means to continue speaking, continue running, continue talking. And in this situation, to carry straight on means to continue your direction, to continue your movement straight. Okay, you'll come into or you'll enter a room, and this is the main library room. Okay, we know that already. There is fiction in the shelves. So the shelves are the objects, estanca, I think in Espanol, you have a top shelf, bottom shelf, but also the preposition for me, normally I say on the shelf, the book is on the shelf, but in this situation, the lady said in the shelves, okay? Also, it's creative because you can say to shelve your idea, and that means to put your idea in the back of your mind, okay? So if you shelve an idea, the significance is to forget the idea for the moment and put the idea away for the future. Okay, so that's a typical expression as well, separate from this context. Okay, non-fiction materials on the right, so that's no problem. We know this already. And on the shelves, so again, here's the preposition on. For me, it's more typical, but the first example she said in. On the far wall, so that's the wall that's distant away from you, there is an excellent collection of books relating to local history. And again, the difference between story and history is very, very important. The story from the weekend, the story about your friend, but the history is maybe the subject in school. You study history in school or the history of the country. So there is a big difference between story and history. We're hoping to add a section on local tourist attractions. So at the moment they don't have, so maybe that's a little confusion later in the year. Through is a través, through the far door in the library, just past the fiction shelves is a seminar room. So that's no problem because we know this already. And that can be booked for meetings or talks. And next door for me is the key expression. So I live here and my next door neighbor is the neighbor that lives directly beside me. Okay, so the next door neighbor, that is the children's library. So I think that was another answer. The children's library is located next door to the seminar room. Good collection of stories. So there's an example, the difference between history and stories, and picture books for the under 11s. Then there's a large room to the right of the library area. That's the multimedia connection where you can borrow videos and DVDs and so on. So on is a more formal, a more appropriate way to say etc. Okay, so a lot of people say etc, but I think so on is more appropriate and more formal as well. Okay, and we also have CD-ROMs and you can borrow. Again, the difference between to lend and to borrow is very important. Como prestar y dar de prestar, to use on your computer at home. It was originally the art collection, but that's been moved to another is for singular, another day, another week, another person, but other is for plural, okay? And that's about it. Oh, there's also the library office on the left of the librarian's desk, and I think we know that already. So not too difficult. For me, the most difficult expression was carry straight on, which means to continue in that direction. And next door They were probably the most problematic expressions, but not too difficult really. Okay, good. So that's just an example of the listening, one little part of the listening in the IELTS. And of course, we have a lot more material on the website. And that's just a little sample you can see here. That was only sample 7, but we have a few more to do. And every webinar, each week, we do a different part of the exam. And that's the idea of the webinar. We practice some reading, we practice some speaking, we practice some writing, and we practice some listening as well. Remember, they're the 4 areas of the exam: speaking, writing, listening, and reading. And in the webinar, we try to practice every week, okay? And maybe some conversation as well. So you're welcome to join next week. We have a webinar at the same time, 3:15 next Wednesday, dedicated to the IELTS. There's a fee of €6 to participate, and you're welcome to join whenever you want. You can pay as you go. As well as this, we have specific classes during the mornings, and depending on the level, we have groups of advanced, groups of B2, groups of beginners to practice some English classes during the morning and during the day. And you are welcome to join and attend whenever you want. There's a WhatsApp group, and people can connect and find a group through the WhatsApp group. Okay, so hopefully this helped a little. And again, thank you so much for connecting and for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and keep in contact and hopefully leave a comment, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.